Welcome to the Voyage Podcast, a show that traverses the oceans of myth and legend through the lens of Catholic theology and philosophy. Come aboard as we set sail in pursuit of the heroic life and Christian virtue, with your hosts, Mike Schramm and Jacob Klatte.
Hey everybody, I'm Mike.
And I'm Jacob.
And welcome to our maiden voyage of the Voyage Podcast. And we're going to call this one Origin Story because just like every comic book character, every comic book needs a good origin story, this Voyage Comics podcast has to have a good origin story as well. And that includes Voyage Comics itself. And so that's what kind of brings on our two guests that we have today.
Mike LaVoy.
And Phil Kosloski.
And they're going to be talking to us a little bit about Voyage Comics itself and its background, its own origin, and how that same origin sort of led to the natural development that this podcast is. So in the same way, we're going to be talking to them about that, talking about what we hope to see happen in this podcast as a whole, what we want to talk about. It's going to be a lot of things related to faith, of course, comic books, literature, stories in general. And so that's what this first episode that kind of leads us into a lot of the big things going forward is going to be.
Hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves here, though, Mike. We know nothing about this LaVoy and Kosloski's guys' character. We had them introduce themselves with their names just so I didn't have to pronounce them. I mean, LaVoy is easier, I guess. French, but easier.
It's our alter egos. You notice you never see Phil and I in the same room with Superman and Batman at the same time.
I always assumed Phil was just a picture on a screen, and then the writing was just like some bot, because I actually haven't, seen him or spoken to him yet. So, but that's what happens when you don't live in the God city of, our part of the state, our corner of the world.
Well, half the reason I even, signed up to do this is just to find out if Phil was in fact a real person. So I guess that's one mystery put to bed.
Is this a teaser into your artificial intelligence episode you're planning?
Well, I wouldn't call Phil intelligent.
It is now. It is now, but I think there's something to, I think there's definitely room to explore just like the concept of mystery and where we can kind of see it show up in stories and comics and that sort of thing. So yeah.
To get things going here, let's start off with getting to know Phil and Mike first. Guys, you guys want to give us a little bit of a bio?
Sure. I'll start. So, so I'm Phil Kosloski. I'm the founder of Voyage Comics. And really, being the founder of a comic book company was something I never really dreamed or imagined of doing. Even as a kid, I can't really say that I had a very large comic book collection, maybe, 5 comics that I somewhat read. But then as I grew older, started to really get active in my Catholic faith, I wanted to kind of share it in a new and entertaining way. And a few years ago, it's probably around 2018 or so, I had this idea of creating these Catholic comic books. And when I started, again, like I said, I had absolutely no experience. I wasn't a script writer or anything. But then at the time I did have a blog, and I was kind of proposed this idea to kind of my audience at the time. And surprisingly, there was someone who suggested to me, a Catholic who was a veteran from Marvel Comics, Jim Fern, and he kind of really helped to kind of cement the idea, like, hey, maybe I could do this. And then at the same time too, I knew I needed an artist, and I was looking at this Catholic coloring book that was recently put out a few years ago, and is by this Michael LaVoy, and I'd never heard of him before. I'll be honest.
What?
And
You hadn't heard of Mike LaVoy? Crazy. Yeah. Oh man, hiding under a rock over here.
That's the ringing endorsement. You
Mild mannered Mike LaVoy.
nothing says entertainment, literature in a world like I'd never heard of him before.
Yeah, but I really was kind of struck by his artwork, and I knew some kind of common friends, and so I just kind of sent Mike an email saying, "Hey, do you want to do a comic book?" and that was kind of it. Like I only had a vision for one comic book, and then that's kind of how we got started.
Yeah. And I'll just chime in here, Phil, if you don't mind. But you and I think we're really on a similar path in our spiritual journey at the same time. And like you said, we knew of each other. I think we'd seen each other at least once, maybe twice, through some mutual friends, but didn't really know each other. And you were kind of seeking God's will on how you could use your writing talent to serve Him. And I was seeking God's will on how I could use my artistic talent to serve Him. And I think, divine providence brought us together and has continued to work in this company, building it up to what it has become. And so hopefully when you said you're struck by my artwork, that was a good thing. I didn't give you like a heart attack or something because it was so bad. But but that was right around the time where I had first started freelancing. I had completed that coloring book for a small Catholic publisher. And shortly after, you gave me the phone call about this comic book idea. And I was just thrilled and excited. I love comic book art. I've always kind of been more of an animation person growing up. That was kind of always the dream. But really attracted to comic book art, and certainly being able to work with Jim Fern, as you mentioned, and being guided by him as a young artist was kind of a dream come true. And again, definitely, a godsend. So, as you said,
how did that even happen? How did you guys run into this Marvel comic artist? You guys make it sound like they're just like walking down the street every day. It's like, oh, hey, I know you. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, kind of like I said, I had a blog, just kind of, it wasn't about comic books at all, just about kind of Catholic spirituality, and for several years. And it's the funny thing with the internet is you never know who is on your email list, and so a person on the email list who was kind of following my own writing knew this Catholic artist, Jim Fern, who had worked for Marvel for like 30 years, and introduced us to, and really, like, from my point of view, it was very providential because, like I said, I didn't know anyone in the comic book industry, but meeting him, and then there are also some other key connections that we've made over the years have really helped us to not only make, just to make comic books, but actually make good ones that people want to pick up.
This is a Catholic podcast, though, Phil, so you're supposed to say you were waiting in line for confession, and he was right there behind you in line, and you're like, hey, aren't you? Like that's the answer that we're gonna try to market though a little bit. So you guys talked a little bit about kind of like the practical sort of circumstances that led to, your background, to the start of Voyage, but you were saying how it had to do with a re-engagement or just a deepening of each of your Catholic faiths. And so what was it specifically about your Catholic faith that led to stories or comics or artwork or visual arts, those sorts? Like, was there an idea, or was there, like I said, a piece of the faith that really resonated with you that had to do with this, for lack of a better term, content creation, so to speak?
Yeah, so I can tell you that for me, I was kind of looking around and just making this observation that I really wanted better Catholic entertainment available to my kids. you look for Catholic entertainment, and there's some out there, but generally speaking, it's not very good. It's low budget. It's kind of cheesy, and I think my kids deserve better than that.
Name names.
Yeah,
Name
no,
names.
we're gonna keep. You're gonna get us in trouble. So yeah, I really wanted to address that, and I'm sure Phil, you can talk a little bit about that as well. I'm sure you kind of had a similar feeling.
Yeah, it's so at the time, kind of when I was starting to think about, writing and kind of evangelizing through media, I had been working at the parish level, and just one thing I've always found that sometimes it's good to teach kind of the truths of the faith or to teach the catechism, but often you can only do that kind of after someone's like kind of encountered the faith in some way, and often, whether we realize it or not, we encounter it through stories, and just that the idea of presenting kind of Catholic truths in a narrative format just really kind of, it made sense to me, and it just also kind of made sense how in so many other areas of our life, we encounter stories and we're captivated by stories, and it really brings us in, or it has a lot of potential to either lead us towards God or away from God, and so I wanted to kind of focus on, well, let's make stories that can lead us to God.
So it's not so much obviously not a replacement for the gospel, but it's not an overt just retelling of the gospel or the life of Jesus. It's something that sort of like moves you along that path, whether it's exciting the imagination or provoking thought, like you said, through entertainment or through stories and things like that.
I think we tend to be creatures that are the sum of all the little things we take in. And I think we unknowingly sometimes take in a lot of content that may seem harmless in itself, but when you aggregate it with all the other content you're taking in, and it all really, I think, stems from an atheist worldview. Again, even if something seems neutral, it's not really leading us closer to God, and therefore, if it's not leading us closer to God, we're either stagnant or we're moving backwards. And so we wanted to provide, again, something that allowed Catholics to consume little bits here and there of enjoyment that builds them up towards God.
I really love what you're saying here, because as a parent, one of the things that I realized a while back is that most of my communication with my kids is negative, in the sense of like, no, that's bad, no, that's bad, no, that's bad, no, that's bad. It's like, well, what's good, Dad? Like, oh, is that comic not good for my soul? Is that movie not good for my soul? Okay, well, what is good for my soul then? And there's this reality where even if what I just said is kind of a caricature of what it's like with my relationship with my kids, it's not that far off, whereas we live in this climate, this culture of what you were getting at, this kind of de facto atheistic, God isn't here reality. Even the neutral stuff, it doesn't have God in it. It doesn't have Jesus in it. And so we've already seeded the ground in this modern era that neutrality means not getting closer to Jesus. Like, and that's not neutral for Christians. That's a net negative. And if we don't create content that we can point to as parents, all we're going to be able to do is tut all the things that our kids' friends are into, and it sets us up for failure.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of the whole idea of, or the whole Catholic concept of grace building on nature. We sometimes only focus on the grace, but that assumes that there's already a foundation of nature there. And so when it comes to, we want to instill in them all of this sense of grace when it comes to obviously prayer or the sacraments or the gospel or whatever, but that assumes there's a level of nature on which to build upon. And if there isn't that natural connection or that natural element, which is through, relationships but especially stories, because that's how, whether it's us as dads relating to our kids and, watching things together or reading books together or talking about those things together, that's that foundation of nature upon which we can then build, right? Or God can build with grace, and whether it's the grace of the sacraments, the grace of the gospel, talking about Jesus stuff, so to speak. It's like that already presumes that we've already had those connections through, whether it was a movie we watched or a comic book we read or something like that.
Well, another thing that I like about it is this idea that when we venture into other cultures, right, historically speaking, when Christianity has spread throughout regions and things like that, oftentimes it would be engaging with the culture that's there and mining from it what's good, right? So there's this kind of modern myth that Christianity just goes and bulldozes other cultures, that it just goes in there and it just everything's about hacking down the like Odin tree or whatever, like all these different stories. But there's an awful lot of Christianity that is not just erasing people's heritage, it's finding the gospel in it, right? And so, comic books, they're an American cultural product. They're one of those things that we developed in this country, so why not take that culture and use it for Christ?
Yeah, I think we have to face the fact too that we have more time for leisure than any people in the history of the world, and we consume a lot of entertainment as a result. And so we're being formed by the things we consume, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah, and I really do kind of believe in the concept as well of how beauty can attract, and just the idea that that God is beautiful, and anything in the world that participates in that beauty can lead us towards Him. And so that's why I love the comic book format, because it has potential of beautiful images, but then as well kind of a beautiful story that goes along with it, and can then hopefully lead us to the truth and goodness of God.
Well, and to go kind of connect Jacob and Phil's points together of if the whole idea of evangelization, it's not the colonization of taking away what made the culture what it was, whether it's going to some, far off place of the earth, or re-engaging the culture as we see it now, and doing it through beauty, it's like you're drawing out what was good or what was already there, drawing out, whether it was the beautiful element or the true element to it. And then again, it's God's way in a larger scale of being able to give that grace where there's the fertile soil, so to speak, right? If we kind of paraphrase that parable that Jesus gives about, there has to be the seed that's planted, there's the soil, and then the watering and the time and the development. And comic books now, along with the sort of video or TV adaptations of comics, that's the new mythology. It's the mythology that the early Christians were experiencing, but now it's a new medium for the same kind of mythical structure or similar stories, things like that. That whole concept of the seeds of the word, that goes back to early Christianity, whether we're talking St. Justin Martyr, St. Irenaeus of Lyon, some of these first Christian theologians who had to kind of engage with this largely pagan culture. Fortunately, Christians don't have to deal with anything like that anymore, but dealing with this like anti-Christian or non-Christian, where they have all of these different experiences, philosophies, stories, mythologies, and it's up to these newly converted Christians, theologians, to where is the good? Where is the true? Where is the beautiful in these things? And how can grace build upon this nature that's already here? Because we, by our human nature, are going to find true things or discover true things. We're going to create beautiful things or sub-create beautiful things. We're going to, on a natural level, do good things or recognize good things. But then in recognizing that, where is that grace that can build upon those? And that's what this, seeds of the word concept is. That's what so much of Christian theology, as it's developed over 2,000 years, has had to do, is it's had to look out at the world around it, whether it's the 1st century, the 10th century, or the 21st century, and say, what is the true, what is the good, what is the beautiful that's here? And then how can Christianity, or how can God reconcile these things with the faith that's been handed down? Does that kind of, I guess as a sort of like brief overview, that certainly relates to what you guys are doing at Voyage and what we want to do with this podcast too.
Yeah, I think that was, Phil's original aim with the Voyage blog. If any of our listeners are readers of the blog, is typically the writers will take a story, either from a comic book or a movie, and it could even be like a section of a story, a small part of a story, and they will look for the true, the good, and the beautiful, and draw that out for the readers of the blog to ponder.
Well, one of the things that I like to consider is this goes back even to St. Paul himself. So when he ventures into the Areopagus, and he's going to the place where the cultural, milieu.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Yeah, right.
You're doing great, sweetie.
The cultural
one of those is bound to be correct.
Yeah, right. Was being shaped, right, where you have these thinkers and cultural creators and content makers of their day hanging out in this public forum. It's like the Twitter of its time, right? It's like it was a lot harder back then, kids. You actually had to go on top of a mountain and just sit.
I feel like that's the premise of like a cheesy SNL skit, like, or whatever the maybe EWTN does a. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't drop.
Wait,
maybe they have an SNL. Maybe they have a version of SNL that they
Whoa!
do.
Don't give that to EWTN. That's Voyage's next sketch comedy, next on the block for Voyage. It starts here, eventually starts.
I feel like the devotees would come after me, though, so we got to take that part out.
Dude, 20-year plan. We have like a Voyage Comics Plus app.
Yeah, in 20 years.
And it's on Roku. And we've got all the content we've made, all the TV shows that we've produced. I mean, it's going to happen.
The fact that you think Roku will be relevant shows that it's not going to happen.
Yeah, maybe. Oh yeah, Areopagus. Thanks, Mike. I was going somewhere with all that. No, but so he goes and he's like he's quoting Greek literature back to these kind of philosophers and thinkers and, dare I say, influencers. Yeah. Ancient Greek influencers. Yeah. And he's using their culture though, and he's saying, here's Jesus in your culture, or here are the things pointing to Jesus in your culture. So this is not even something that's not in the Bible itself.
All right, so we have done this, as we mentioned, with the blog. We doing it with the comic books. Let's talk a little bit about the podcast and why we're branching out and trying to do a podcast. Let's first start with Mike Schramm and Jacob Klatte. We want to learn a little bit about you guys. We already learned about Phil and I. So, Mike, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So, it's always, I sometimes do this too, where if I'm talking and I'm going to refer to Mike LaVoy, I'm like, do I say Mike? Do I say LaVoy? Do I say Mike LaVoy? But anyway, so I have been working in education, working in Catholic education, pretty much since I graduated it from my undergrad. I got a degree in elementary education, started working actually in the parish setting, doing a lot of adult faith formation, young adult faith formation, anything that had to do with education and preparation in the parish. I was doing a lot of that sort of stuff. And so I did that for 7 years, went back to school, got my master's in theology, and then I started looking at opportunities to teach at the higher level, whether it was high school theology, college level theology. And so that's what I've been doing. This is my 4th year doing that, teaching at the local Catholic high school in our town, and then at the local Catholic university. I just do one class every semester, but I've been teaching theology pretty much ever since I graduated from college. And, talking further about that, I mean, grew up cradle Catholic, went to Catholic school till 7th grade, did all the kind of classic cradle Catholic sorts of things. It wasn't until I went to college, and I was actually going to a non-Catholic evangelical school where it wasn't even anything where it's like, oh, I left the church for a little bit or started practicing something else. I was never even tempted so much to like practice another version of Christianity. It was just really a re-engagement with mere Christianity and how I was able to see that fulfilled, from so much of my Catholic upbringing that I had already experienced. And so that's what kind of led to a deeper, reversion or deeper conversion into the faith, which then, like I said, led to wanting to kind of be in that world more, learning about and teaching Catholic theology.
Awesome, Jacob. Let's hear your side.
Sure. Let's hear. I'm just a really geeky, nerdy guy, and I like to drink beer. And these guys found me in a bar, and they're like, "Hey, you want to do a podcast?" And I was like,
"You approached
sure.
me. You approached me."
Well, I don't know. Sounds like we're getting some revisionist history here, Mike.
You can still be drunk in the story, but you approached me, I think.
I don't know. That's not how I remember it, but we can fight about it.
Shocking.
Yeah, right. Go figure. No, anyway, let's see. I'm a graphic designer by trade, and everything I said was largely true, despite what Mike says. And but I'm a graphic designer by trade. I work in the agriculture industry, actually, so I have zero background in anything related to producing entertainment, which is why this show is so boring. No, I'm just no, but let's see. I came from an evangelical background growing up. I've been through pretty much every form of Christianity there is at this point, where I was Lutheran when I was very young. And then I had a kind of come to Jesus evangelical thing. And then I kind of fell away in my 20s. And during that period of time, I did a lot of kind of seeking and searching and things like that, and found my way back to Jesus. Now I ended up entering the Eastern Orthodox Church. So
one of these things
spoiler
just doesn't
alert.
belong here.
For now.
Yeah. Spoiler alert. So, I'm not a heathen like the rest of you.
Well, this is the problem, though, Jacob, is having you as the Orthodox and Mike as the Catholic. That's kind of our shtick. But what are we gonna do when you can convert to Catholicism? We're gonna start making like a second string, third string list of Orthodox guys to take your place.
Bring in some replacement Orthodox.
Yeah, right. We've tried finding another Orthodox guy willing to talk to me.
Mike is very off-putting. All right, folks. Very awkward in real life, let me tell you. No, but I ended up... Here's the thing is, back when I was evangelical, I totally thought the Catholic Church was like the Whore of Babylon, right? Like, I was very anti-Catholic. And I think there's something providential with me falling away from where I was, but then having a newfound respect for historic Christianity and its development and whatnot. And so I am clearly way friendlier towards the Catholic Church now than I ever was when I was like kind of pre-20, let's say. But yeah, entered the Orthodox Church. That was about 5 or 6 years ago now. And we ended up, again, meeting at a bar, Mike and I did. He says he met me at my church once, too, for one of our Greek festivals. You can correct all this for the record later, I guess.
Our kids were there.
Yeah. I remember the bars. And we were just hanging out. We were hanging out. We became friends. He was doing basically a Bible study at the bar, and I was there with some coworkers, and looking over my shoulder at all those cool kids at the cool kids table, talking about Jesus stuff and being super jealous of it. And as I was walking,
I don't know if we're gonna name drop on here, but it was technically Pints with Aquinas. It was a Pints with Aquinas group. It wasn't just a Bible study.
I wasn't sure if I should
it helps
name
us
drop
get
or
more
not.
listeners, yeah, we're gonna name drop.
Yeah. Well, you know how some people will say like, "Oh, our show brought these two together and they got married." Well, Matt Frad brought us together and
slow
led
down a little
to
bit,
this
Mike.
wonder baby.
Wow, weird
getting
metaphors
awkward.
going on over there. Yeah, I told you he was awkward, folks. No, so we ended up. I was like, hey, here's my information. Contact me next time you guys are doing this. And that led into a multi-year kind of relationship where once a month we would, and a group of people would go meet and, just hang out like young Christian men at a bar having a good time. We're not Ned Flanders, we...
You got to include, though, the real turning point in our friendship, Jacob, was when we both drove an hour to go see Peter Kraft give a talk
It's true.
about the virtue of prudence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it was that's when we were like, okay, this is going to be a lasting friendship, because nobody else wanted to go with me.
Yeah, no, I was his bottom of
Believe
the
it or
barrel, Leave it to the Orthodox. The Orthodox guy actually accepted the invitation.
Oh, I know.
I mean,
we're
like,
always shamed. We're
wow.
always shamed amongst the Gentiles. We're always shamed.
So anyway, that's how, and then eventually Mike LaVoy ended up coming to those groups, and that's kind of how I ended up here.
Yeah, so like Jacob said, I went to the groups, and I really enjoyed the conversational setting and the topics that would come up, and I thought we just need to capture this in a podcast.
Monetize it, I think, is what you...
Yeah, that's what you meant to say, right? We need to make money off this somehow. How can we make money off this?
That's right.
When they were coming out with Voyage podcast, they were really thinking conquistadors, right? Like they're looking for the gold in the hills.
You forgot to include that on the logo. You didn't do that in the... Yeah.
I'm honestly just gonna sit here and trash talk.
I was gonna say, bite the hand that feeds me. How about? It's like,
Are you sure you want me to
Luckily,
be
we
on
don't
your
pay
own?
you guys anything.
yeah. Oh, and it's like it's not like this is the first time I've ever spoken to the founder of Voyage in person, but whatever. It's like we'll just keep going down that track too. I'll just keep dragging the name through the mud the whole time.
All right,
This is gonna be great.
So for you two, so this is kind of your baby. We're gonna hand it off to you. What is it that you want to accomplish in this podcast? What are the things you want to bring? Why another podcast?
Well, you guys both kind of mentioned in just the founding of Voyage Comics is the whole idea of finding the true, finding the good, finding the beautiful, and doing that through the specific medium of comic books, or really kind of literature. If this kind of falls under that umbrella of literature, and podcasting is just another medium where that same sort of thing can happen, but now it's through not necessarily the beauty of the visual arts, but beauty of a conversation, right? Which is, like you said, Mike, that's what inspired you to want this, is you were recognizing, not that you would have necessarily used that term, but it was like there was a truth, there was a goodness, and there was a beauty to the conversations that we were able to have. And so how can we, bring that same thing out when talking about the goodness of the faith, the truth of the faith, and the beauty of the faith found in the different avenues, the different mediums, like mythological stories or mythological characters or comic book characters, comic book stories, movie characters, TV shows, whatever. And so it's that same kind of, I guess that's the why another one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think it's important that you brought up the difference between the different types of media. There's certain things that you can do in comic books that you can't do with traditional literature, that you can't do in film or other mediums. But at the same time, there's things you can do in a podcast that you can't do in comic books. So we have this whole different avenue to, again, spread truth and goodness and beauty. And you guys, will maybe be able to do that. I'm not sure. You might fail horribly. Time will tell.
Yeah.
But that's the goal, right?
Yep. Fair enough, man. Fair enough. I never asked for this, Mike. No. He says that I approached him. But no, I never thought that I would end up doing a pod. Yeah. And it really kind of came out of left field as far as like my life plans go, right? I enjoy a good podcast as much as the next guy, but having the opportunity, having the, kind of privilege really to come onto a program like this and try to bring the reality of Christ into the everyday, by talking about the stories that we tell each other and how they shape the culture around us. There needs to be a lot more of this. The big thing that is going to be my relationship with Voyage Comics is creating content that provides Christians somewhere to live, culturally speaking. We need more than just us doing this, but you got to start somewhere. And this company is an organization that can, lay some groundwork. And I'm pretty excited for the possibility of creating a counterexample, and actually creating our own space for faithful Christians to enjoy this world. Because at the end of the day, a lot of this content is about enjoyment, but not have to trade off anything in order to experience joy through entertainment, but for the glory of God.
Well, and there's a reason why it feels like every organization or every public figure is doing some sort of podcast, and most of them, I know a lot of them are just one person, one talking head in front of a mic, but so many of them are built off of the concept of a conversation, not only because it's so desperately needed, right? Even where, technically, if I'm listening to a conversation, I feel like I'm there, but I'm not actually there. But it's like, we want that because we recognize how true, how good, and how beautiful that is. And so it's like, who wouldn't want to play a role in creating something? I mean, I know it sounds strange, but like, who wouldn't want to have a role in creating a beautiful conversation? Think of how life-giving that is after you just finish having a very, whether it's a deep conversation with a friend or just an uplifting, encouraging one. It's like you felt like you've created something true, good, and beautiful. And so getting that opportunity to, talk with a good friend or good friends and, about things that we both care about, ultimately about Christ, but through the different avenues of artwork, whether it's stories or, visual mediums or whatever, who wouldn't want to participate in that?
I know I do.
Yeah, it's great. We're blessed to give you guys this avenue to do that. And why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the ideas you have planned? Like, what are some of the topics you're going to talk about, and what do you hope to?
Yeah, I mean, you mean like in terms of topics and that sort of thing?
So yeah, start with the topics. Give us some ideas of some of the things you're going to talk about.
I mean, the first couple that I think we were just both kind of excited about and wanted to talk about right away had to do with just sort of like the kind of the meta-narrative or the monomyth or the just what are the characteristics that all stories have, which I think is a really good kind of foundational episode or foundational topic, because it's something that we can keep revisiting every time we talk about, this story or this character or this event that we seem to, a trend almost that we seem to see happen in all these different movies or all these different TV shows. We can point back to this big sort of, what Joseph Campbell calls the hero's journey, or what so many people have come across as the hero's journey. So that's kind of our first like two-parter that we want to talk about. Because there are always so many ethical implications in the different stories that we tell and the things that we watch. We have another one that talks about the classic trolley problem, but through, I think, a little bit of a unique lens in terms of, well, how are we approaching it that's a little bit different, but that's the only thing I'll give as a teaser. I'm not going to go into any more than that.
And again, you'll be looking at stories too to tie into that, which is appropriate because we're a story company. That's our mission is to find the good and the beautiful through stories.
Well, yeah, and all of these are going to be in the context of, well, this is where we've seen this scenario play out, or this is where we see this trope, or this is where we see this, concept. Again, whether it's looking at one story very closely or just saying, wow, we see this across the board in the 5 most popular movies of the last, 10 years or something like that. So those sorts of things.
Awesome. Well, I think we're just about out of time, Mike. So let's go ahead. Is there anything else you wanted to add or Phil?
I'm looking forward to the podcast. I'm just gonna sit back and relax and listen.
Yeah, nobody believes you exist, Phil, so I wanted to make sure you got a word in there.
Yep.
I'll vouch for you, Phil.
That's good.
Yeah. I'm excited to get this thing going. I'm excited for just to talk about things that I love and enjoy, and find out how they can be a path towards learning more about Jesus. At the end of the day, there's not some kind of division out there. There's only what's true. There's only the reality that God has made around us, and that includes this kind of like good forces and bad forces playing out in the background. And you're going to see that battle in all kinds of different mediums and stories that weren't inherently designed to be Christian, but they still reflect truth. And insofar as they reflect that truth, you're going to find Christ there. So let's pull all that out so that people can start to see Christ everywhere they look.
Thanks to all those who joined us this hour. We hope it was fun and beneficial for you. Please subscribe to the Voyage Podcast.
Stop.
Is that too canned?
Mike,
Is that-
you're reading it.
yeah. Okay. So.
No pressure.
Yeah.
Do it better. Do it better, Mike.
Oh, now this will feel. Thanks to all those who joined us this hour. Oh, you just ruined it. Thanks to all those who joined us this hour. No, it's good if you have the laughing in the background, right? It feels more authentic. Thanks. Oh,
Right.
See, now we can. Are we all gonna like? Okay.
Yeah, just start. No.
Thanks.
Let's all just start with a group laugh.
Thanks to all those who joined us this hour. We hope it was fun and beneficial for you. Please subscribe to the Voyage Podcast so you don't miss our upcoming episodes. We hope you'll join us on our next episode as we begin our discussion on the hero's journey.